Hi everybody, and welcome today to Jill Haley, who's very recently retired from her day job in the housing sector. And Jill joins us today as one of the 3 candidates who have been shortlisted for this year's election to become Vice President of the Chartered Institute of Housing. Hi Jill, and welcome. How are you?
Hi there. Hi.
Thanks for coming along today. I'd be really interested to find out, first of all, a little bit about your background and about your journey into housing.
Right, thank you. Well, it's a very interesting journey and one where CIH has been with me pretty much from the very start and the cornerstone of my professional career. So, like many people, I fell into housing. It wasn't my career of choice. In fact, I was just rumbling along. I was suddenly orphaned aged 13, so started working in a hairdresser's on a Saturday and weekends, holidays to buy clothes, etc. So I naturally thought, oh, I'll become a hairdresser. Unfortunately, I had to leave school, couldn't go on to do A-levels because I lived with my 21-year-old sister and it just wasn't financially achievable. But I had taken 9 O-levels and was quite a clever kid, and the careers office had different ambitions for me. So they sent me for an interview at the housing department. And the reason I took the job, I don't mind admitting at the time, was because it was £47 per week. And I think that's something that's probably underestimated by young people, that housing isn't just a fantastic career to get into, but it's well paid as well. So the alternative was a £25 a week hairdressing job. To a £47 a week scale 1 clerk, where my roles were filing, making the tea, and pretty much just doing the post, etc. But it meant I could give my sister £20 and then I had £27 for myself to buy clothes and makeup and etc. So that's how my housing career started. And inside housing was one of the items of post that every week I had to deliver to the leadership team. On the front of the Inside Housing magazine was a distribution list that I used to staple on, and then the leadership team would cross their name off as I took it around the offices and they read it. And I always thought to myself, as a young person, one day I'm going to have my name on here. And obviously key to that was becoming a member of the Chartered Institute of Housing. So again, unconventionally, I went to work in the private sector, and it was there that I became a member of Chartered Institute of Housing. And I think sometimes in social housing, we think we're quite elite, quite exclusive in terms of the CIH, but in the private sector, they also have ambitions to be good professionals and have professional standards. So I did a HNC while working for the Halifax. I was the only private student in the classroom at university when I did the HNC. But it was a great experience, and it drove me back to where my heart belonged, which was social housing. So I went back to work for the council, finished my Bachelor of Arts degree in housing, become a fully qualified member of the CIH, and worked my way up the career ladder to eventually becoming Chief Executive of Biker Community Trust, my last position, which you quite rightly pointed out, I've recently retired from. And I've got to say that was probably the best job that I had in my life. But throughout that, Chartered Institute of Housing has been the cornerstone of my career. I've also been a member of the CIH North East Board. I started off as membership officer and doubled the membership in 3 years by working in partnership with CIH centrally, my employer, and an external private business who would provide sponsorship to allow people who had a housing qualification to access a fast access route to professional corporate membership, and in a cost-effective way for employers. So that helped to double the membership in the North East. Then went on to be the vice chair and eventually the chair, where again I introduced new events and activities which were very popular and more profitable for CIH. So working in tandem with the CIH throughout my career as I progressed to the last position, which was chief executive level.
Great, thank you, Jill. And my next question is why you'd like to be Vice President of the Chartered Institute of Housing?
Yeah, great question. The honest answer to that is I think it's time for me to give something back. And it's something that's been suggested to me for a number of years now, but I really couldn't justify the time and attention that the Vice President role needed. In my opinion, tenants were paying my wages and I couldn't justify being out of the office a lot. Collecting badges and gongs isn't my thing. People who know that who know me know that that's just not my thing. What I do is I'm very organised, I work hard and I get things done and I bring people along with me. So I think I want to make a positive difference to the Chartered Institute of Housing by being an inspirational president, someone who listens to the membership and represents the membership, because let's face it, I'm a perfect ambassador from the story that I've just told you. CIH runs through me like a stick of rope. And I now, most importantly, want to give it priority, because I know I can give it the time and energy and commitment that it requires. Of course, giving something back could come in different guises. I care about many issues, especially given the area that I've just worked in, which was suffering some really major raw issues on a daily basis. Poverty and deprivation being a conduit for many of those things, mental health, homelessness, antisocial behaviour, domestic violence, worklessness. So levelling up is very important to me. But for the term of my vice presidency and for presidency, I will concentrate on the CIH, its members, the sector, and hoping that I can be the living embodiment of that and what the CIH can do, particularly for young people. Because I know a chair of mine, Jim Colton, a fantastic mentor, always said to me, Jill, confidence comes from competence, sorry. And that competence is there, you know, it's there in the training, in the networking and in the activities that CIH just does. So that needs to become the benchmark for the whole sector. And I think for me, or for members rather, I could give good value for money. Because I can guarantee that I can give that role everything I've got and the commitment which it needs.
Yeah, great, thank you. And my last question, just following on from that, really is, if you are successful, what would drive you through the vice presidency and then subsequently the presidency?
Yeah, well, supporting the current president, obviously, and her campaign will be very important. For mine, it will be about sticking to the knitting. It's all going to be about raising awareness of the Chartered Institute of Housing, the sector to young people especially, because if we consider the Housing White Paper and the evolving agenda, it's about professional standards. The sector's getting a bit of a kicking at the moment in terms of reputational damage by the media because of the state of some housing and because of the salaries of some chief executives. But I would suggest that's a minority issue, not a majority, because actually we're a very values-driven and purposeful sector, and we need to get those messages across more clearly. So about developing and supporting, promoting the professional standards to CIH members and to organisations alike. So they need to be the benchmark for the sector, not just for our membership. Providing a platform for CPD particularly, so that's something that is constantly benchmarked and tested. And I think that would give the sector something to be proud about, something that we can do together and shout out loud about together. So challenging poor conduct, which, as I said earlier, is a minority issue, but making sure that that's there, and also being an independent voice for the sector. The CIH has got everything it needs. You know, we're a proper tooled up in terms of the professional standards, etc. We just need to roll them out. So my campaign would be all about the CIH as a professional, and for how we get that message out loud and clear to the sector.
Yeah, great. Okay, thank you, Jill. That's the end of my questions today. So it just leaves me to thank you again for your time and to wish you best of luck with the forthcoming election.
Thank you very much.
Great, thanks. Chan is the Group Chief Executive at East Midlands Housing Group. Hi, Chan.
Hello there, Laura.
It would be great to start off if you could tell us a little bit about your background and your journey into housing.
Okay, well, I came to this country when I was very young and emigrated from Uganda in 1972, actually
Mm-hmm.
after a few stints in private rented housing, fairly substandard housing. We moved into a council home,
Okay.
So when I talk about social housing, I do have some personal experience of it. When I left university in the sort of early 80s, I decided that I didn't want to be an accountant, nothing against accountants, but I wanted to do something with a social purpose. I've always been motivated by the ability to make a difference. So I started to work in a local authority, working with homeless people. And today I'm a CEO of EMH Group, which is a large regional housing group.
Okay, great. And could you tell us a little bit about why you want to be Vice President of the Chartered Institute of Housing?
Well, with over 30 years of experience in local authorities, housing associations, with housing education and other aspects of housing, I felt really that I want to be in a position now to be able to influence policy at a national level. So I think to be able to act as an ambassador for the CIH and promote professional standards in housing would be a great privilege for me. And more immediately, obviously as Vice President, if I were to be successful, my role would be to support Jo Richardson in terms of her role as President, and in particular to support her wonderful campaign called Homeful, which is a publication that's a must read, because having worked with homeless people, I know how important it is for society to address that burning issue. So I'd certainly see my role initially as Vice President to support Jo, but actually also to be a member, continue to be a member of the CIH board.
Yep.
Because in that capacity, I suppose it's my role, along with the CEO and other members of the governance body, to ensure that the CIH is run effectively.
Sure. Great. Okay. And finally, just if you were successful, what do you think would drive you through your vice presidency and then into your presidency? You've obviously touched a little bit about that just now, but is there anything else that you'd like to add to that at all? So
yeah, I think the vice presidency is an opportunity to get used to the role that you will assume when you're a president. And of course, as I say, working with Jo, supporting her campaign, but also being an effective member of the CIH board, is something I'd assume immediately. But really, as president, ultimately, I would see my role in a number of different ways. Firstly, to protect the reputation of the sector. And, you know, we all know the sector's taken a bit of a battering recently, and I would say generally over the last decade. I'd certainly want to use the opportunity I would have to promote equality, diversity and inclusion.
Sure.
CIH is deeply committed to it. It's dear to my own values. And I see it as a bit of a failure of the sector that 30 years ago, we talked about underrepresentation from BAME communities, women on boards, so on. Today, we're having exactly the same debate. So I think that's something we need to do a great deal about. The other thing I'd see myself being involved with is the whole issue of professionalism. I do have some experience of housing education as an examiner, as a lecturer, and so on, and as a student. So, you know, I experienced housing education in a number of different ways, and I know the importance of professionalism. It's helped me to get to where I am today, and I think it could help a lot of other people. And I think the social housing white paper gives us a great opportunity to do that. And I think it could be a means by which we can address the whole stigmatization problem. But crucially, I think it's a good way to promote housing as a career of choice, particularly for young people, many of whom leave colleges, school, universities, but don't see affordable housing, social housing as a kind of career path. When you think about it, that every city, every town in this country has a housing association. And they have a whole range of different professions and occupations within those organizations. And actually to be able to advance your career, but actually make a real difference.
Yeah.
Such a powerful argument that I think we need to do it more powerfully, make that argument. The other thing, of course, is that I would use it as an opportunity to argue for causes that are dear to me. I mentioned the issue of homelessness.
Yeah.
I think, in the fifth richest country in the world, to see people sleeping rough on our streets is just not acceptable.
Yeah.
I think we ought to use our influence in any way we can at the CIH to influence government policy and help to address that. I've certainly talked about professionalism, but also I would argue for other causes such as affordability, increasing housing supply, because ultimately there is a housing crisis and we're not building enough homes. If you like, that's at the root of all of the problems we have, or many of the problems that we have. And the other thing that's important to me, because we're a housing and care organisation, and I can see some of the great work that our people do in providing vital services for those people who have learning disabilities, older persons who need care. And I can see that our interventions do make a difference. So I think the whole issue of adult social care and the fact that we've also got a care crisis as well as a housing crisis is something we need to bear in mind. But above all of that, there are some big issues that face us over the next, decade. And we need to be at the heart of the levelling up debate. Housing associations and housing organisations and local authorities generally are anchors within their communities.
Sure.
And I think the levelling up agenda is something we ought to be heavily involved in. We've got the big issues of decarbonisation, and there are some serious questions to ask. The aims are entirely laudable. We've got to support them. I think it's a great opportunity for the sector to lead the way. But how it's going to be paid for is still a question that needs to be answered. What kind of technology we use needs to be addressed. But above all, the most important thing here is how do we bring our residents along? Because ultimately, this is all about residents, our tenants, many of whom suffer from fuel poverty, and to be able to say to them that we want to make changes to the heating system so that we could save the environment when they're more concerned about where the next meal is coming from is something we need to square. And I think we need to have a meaningful dialogue with them. And then finally, in terms of the other big issue, there are too many big issues, but this is the world post-COVID.
Sure.
And nobody believes that we can go back to the old normal. So I think we're all evolved. The new normal is evolving, and we're all going on that journey. And I think there's a huge debate to be had in terms of where housing organisations end up in terms of that journey.
Yeah. Great, thank you. Well, it sounds like there's lots of challenges ahead for the sector indeed. Thank you very much for your time today, Chan, and best of luck with the election.
Thank you very much, Laura, and I look forward to the outcome of the elections and the hustings before then.
Great, thank you, Chan.
Thank you.
Hi, and welcome today to Lara Oyedele, who's currently Chair of Hope Housing. Lara joins us as one of the 3 candidates who have been shortlisted for this year's election to become Vice President of the Chartered Institute of Housing. Hi, Lara.
Hi, Laura. How are you today?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Not too bad at all. Not too bad at all. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Can you start off by telling us a little bit about your background and your journey into housing?
Yes, I had a very interesting journey into the profession of social housing. I mean, I grew up in council housing, but I didn't think it was a thing at the time. It was just where I grew up. It didn't mean anything to me. It's just like, this is our house, the council owned it, and we grew up. And then I got to the age where I left home, moved into a bedsit as a teenager, and I went away on holiday, came back from holiday and found that my landlord had evicted me. And I know that that was an illegal eviction, but at the time I didn't know any better. I just thought, well, the man's evicted me. It's his house. I don't have any right. And I became homeless. So I experienced homelessness. I think I was about 19 or 20 at the time. So I was homeless. I had nowhere to go. I was an unusual homeless person in the respect that I had 3 part-time jobs. So I was working, I had a cleaning job in the morning. I worked in an office in the afternoon. That office, this is going to make you laugh, was actually a housing office. So I was working as a housing assistant in an office in the afternoon for like 4 hours. And then in the evening, I worked in the post office as a sorter. So I was homeless and I did sleep rough, but I was able, in between those 3 jobs, to more or less, more often than not, find somewhere to sleep. So I slept in the office when nobody was there, and I slept. This is the office where I cleaned, and I slept in the bay where the post office vans used to go from. And I did the bench and all sorts of random places and friends' sofas for a couple of nights. So I had that experience, and eventually I was given a council flat. It was in the worst block known to mankind, but it was my flat, my front door, 2 bedrooms, and I was totally grateful for that. And it's that experience that made me decide, after I went to university, to choose specifically to work in social housing. And I'd always had a bit of a fondness for property, but I chose not to become an estate agent or a property developer. I thought I want to give other people the kind of safety, the opportunity, the feeling of joy that I have been handed those keys. I wanted to be part of making that happen for someone else. So that's why, after my first degree, I went to do the Masters in Housing at the LSE, which was specifically to get into the social housing world, and that's how I got my housing.
Great.
So that's my history.
That's your history. Great. And I'd be interested to know a bit about why you would like to be Vice President of the Chartered Institute of Housing.
Well, the short answer is why not?
Yeah.
I was, I don't know what I was doing, and it just came up on Twitter or LinkedIn. I was like, oh my God, I can do that. Why not? And so I looked into the requirements. I thought, well, maybe the time is right. I voted as many times as I can remember as a member, and it never crossed my mind that it's something that I could do or even wanted to do. So I think maybe just the time was right. I think I'm old enough and confident enough and have a bit of a wider understanding of the housing world, because I have a buy-to-let property portfolio. I feel like I have, how can I put it? I can marry the different aspects of housing, because social housing doesn't exist in a vacuum. And what happens in the private sector housing influences what happens with the government and social housing. So so I thought, well, the time now is mine. I wouldn't mind being a trendsetter to be the first Black female. There's nothing wrong with that. And also because I spent many years arguing for and campaigning in favour of social housing in an individual capacity, just because I'm passionate about it. I thought I might as well do it in a professional role. So not much will change, except that I'll have a label behind me saying, yeah, this is why I'm arguing for the sector. So I have been supporting the sector for many years and campaigning in favour of the sector. So this will give me an opportunity to do it with a professional title.
Great. Okay, thank you. And the last question, if you are successful, what will drive you through your vice presidency and then subsequently into the presidency?
I'm not sure I understand that question. You say what will drive me, as in energy or passion?
Yeah, I guess, yeah. What will drive you? What will be your focus? What will keep you going? What will you want to achieve through that, I guess?
Yeah, I've got a couple of things I want to achieve. The first one is actually something that came out of the short time that we've been campaigning, which is to increase the membership. I think for the size of the sector that we work in, it's appalling I think it is that we only have, according to what I could find, 17,000 members. It may be slightly more or less. But the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors have 100,000. And if you think of how many housing associations are out there that have 4,000 or 5,000 staff, we should have a lot more than that. And a lot of people I assumed in the sector were members. I said, will you vote for me? Will you vote for me? He said, I would, but I'm not a member. And I'm like, why are you not a member? You should be a member. So when I do join, all those people, I'll be knocking on their doors and forcing them to join. And for those that run organisations, I will see if we can organise something where organisations pay for their staff to join, because the irony I've noticed that the junior staff who probably need it the most cannot afford to pay for it. And the senior staff who have more money are the ones who are more likely to get it as part of their package, their professional membership fees paid. There are numbers out there, and I feel that if we have more numbers, if we have near 100,000, I don't know if I can achieve that in a year, but I'll give it a damn good try, we might be more influential when it comes to having a political voice. Because with 70,000 people, no one's going to take any notice. I have more connections than that on LinkedIn. So we're not a force to be reckoned with. The ministers only come to us when there's a conference and they know they can get some free publicity, but I don't know if they really take any notice of what we say. So that would be the thing that moves me now. When I originally thought of joining, of campaigning, I had lots of other ideas, which were, it's about campaigning and influencing the government, but then I realized we can't do that if there's only 17,000 of us.
Okay, great. Thank you, Lara. So that was all of the questions today. So that it just leaves me to say good luck with the election, and thank you again for your time today.
All right then. Thank you so much, Laura.
Thank you.